why do they keep making this holy trinity of superhero films? And from holy trinity, we're talking about Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man. Why is it that if it seems, and I don't know if seems is even that accurate, it is. Why is it that we seem to get, yes, other superhero films, but no matter what, on schedule, every generation, we get, and sometimes 2-3 times within a generation, we get a Batman film, a Superman film, and a Spider-Man film. Why is that? Now, obviously, there's a lot of different ways we can go about this, different depths and different levels. But when I first brought this up to BenHaMeen, he had like one main explanation that I would love for you to just repeat here. Well, I'll give you one. Money. Ha ha ha. Money. Duh. But there was another, I think, more specific information that you or explanation that you provided, Ben. What was that?
Yeah, definitely. As far as the holy trinity that you mentioned, 2 of those are Batman and Superman. So those come from the DC world, right? So that's, they're also 2 of DC's biggest characters, but we'll get back to them. The third one is Spider-Man, and that's the special case out of the 3. And why we've seen so many Spider-Man films definitely has to do with money, but also due to the fact of how the deal of Sony has with Marvel Entertainment to license the Spider-Man character and to have the rights to the Spider-Man character and any other characters that are like even involved in the Spider-Man world peripherally, right? The way this deal works is that they have to make a movie within a certain amount of years. They have to keep making a Spider-Man film within a certain amount of years, or Marvel gets the rights back. So this is why you saw what happened with the original Spider-Man films with Tobey Maguire. There were 3 of them. There was actually plans for a 4th one with Sam Raimi still as the director, etc. Sony finally was like, yo, we're not feeling what you're doing, Sam. We want to go this way. They wanted to go that way. Wham, wham, wham. You're out of here. We'll bring in Andrew and reboot this shit real quick because we have to keep these rights. So we got to get this movie. That's why there was really not much of a gap between the Spider-Man franchise and then the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. And then even why they knocked out Amazing Spider-Man 2 just to keep it going and to keep the money rolling in. So
they're doing this as a giant game and keep away. Yeah,
pretty much. And at this point now they've established where, they're just got it. They are not giving it up. As you see, they just made $1 billion with No Way Home. Morbius is about to drop. Venom is making damn near $1 billion every time out. So they are not going to ever give this franchise back to Marvel. And Marvel's accepted that and they're just working together when they can. But that's the special case for Spider-Man.
Is there some type of profit share going on? Because they I mean, especially with the emergence of the multiverse, like they're working together and they've been working together for quite some time. So
yeah, especially
and they meaning Sony and Marvel. So
with the Spider-Man No Way Home, with the No Way Home films, there's definitely been profit sharing, and I think Marvel is still.
What about Avengers, like where Spider-Man shows up?
Oh no.
Or Infinity War or anything like that. Like Sony don't get a small cut of that because you use Spider-Man. That's their property. No. I refuse to believe that they're not getting something.
This is why they're making Morbius, fam. Because they ain't getting like all that money from that, so they just don't keep it going. However, they got to keep it going. But the real question is, and this is something that pertains to another issue that we've been talking about on this show. Shout out to E-Man. We had him on to really discuss this issue, was the recasting of T'Challa, which both of us, for the most part, are kind of ambivalent about, but leaning more towards not. I especially lean more towards whatever the filmmakers say they're going to do. I'm down with that. Let me see the film, and then I'll cast judgment on it. That's
how I feel.
That's just pretty much me. But my one, clause, whatever you want to call it, to that argument is the fact that they will never stop making Batman films. And with that being said, I'd be like, yo, recast T'Challa, because they will recast this white boy over and over and over again. And me personally, like, shout out to Matt Reeves. That's the director of the upcoming Batman film. He directed the last two Planet of the Apes joints in the trilogy. I really love the first one the most, but all three of them are solid ass films, you know, really good movies.
Yeah.
And he's done other stuff, but I don't get like the overall just, oh my God, I can't wait for this Batman movie. I don't get it.
So, you know, I have a lot to say about this, but since we're on Batman, let me ask you some questions. Are you even looking forward to the Robert Pattinson Batman? Battinson.
That's the Matt Reeves joint.
Yeah. Are you looking forward to this?
Yes, in the general sense that it's a movie about Batman and I like Batman. You know, that's...
Do you like Batman, BenHaMeen? You felt differently about him over the years. Let's say you've been more enlightened about him over the years. But do you truly still like him?
No, I'm a huge fan of, like, any of these characters that I take apart. It's because I'm such a fan of them. Like, I go back with Batman to, you know, I mean, what's the first? It wasn't really like the year one. I like year one. It was really the Killing Joke back in the day. I can't lie. I don't really enjoy it like I used to enjoy it, but back in the day, I really enjoyed the Killing Joke, and I love Batman from then. But just Batman as a character throughout the different generations, and then like Grant Morrison, how he showed the whole history of Batman. I love all that ish. You know, what my problem is that I feel like the Batman films, especially, besides Ben Affleck, who I kind of like, but even he leaned into it, or Snyder leaned into it, it's always got to be the dark version of Batman. Like, the comic book has had so many different versions of Batman, but the films just seem to focus on that dark. And then not only dark, they're like, yo, each one is like, I'm going to make it more real than the last one, you know, for some reason. And Batman's a ridiculous, unrealistic character to me, and I think you should lean into that instead of trying to get away from that.
I find that interesting, Ben, because like if you look into old school Batman, right, like that's very goofy in many like.
Well, it depends on how old school you go, because at the beginning Batman was shooting people and dropping them off planes and all kind of wild
well, I'm not
shit.
talking about that one.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the ones where, relatively speaking, you look at it, how he's presented now versus then, there's a lot of goofiness and silliness that you're alluding to.
Yes.
But the thing about that is, I feel like people reject the silliness, the silly side of Batman. For example, if you remember things like in the 90s with like Batman Forever and shit like that, that's when they try to incorporate all of that. Like that was like the bridge between like the Adam West version and then now the more modern like Nolan version, right? Yep. Like that was the middle ground between two, where it was like kind of trying to get serious but not really. And I felt like that has, while it's kind of like a cult classic now, that it had so much camp in it that a lot of people just rejected it outright. And then of course there's the now the lifelong jokes about the bat nipples and this and that that. And even like the way that the characters would talk in those versions of the series, like when you see like Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the way he was talking and the dialogue being used, it was all very goofy, kind of cringy at times, but also depending now because it's a cult classic, people are like, oh, that's classic, that's amazing, right? But at the time, people largely rejected that, whereas 20 years ago, is it like 20 years now or 15? When you look at Nolan's Batman, that was almost immediately accepted, if not like just outright lauded for being so incredible. And because of that sheer like force of will of the success of that, to me, that's why they was like, oh, dark works. Let's get darker. Yes. Let's get harder, because everyone sees this guy as this brooding figure. And then entered into the age of Snyder, and then it got a little weird.
Yes, but you hit the nail on the head. That was exactly DC's, like, I don't want to say problem, because it did make them some money, whatever, but Nolan succeeded with Batman Begins, and I thought that movie was incredible. I think The Dark Knight's incredible. I think Dark Knight Rises is even incredible for what it is in its own way. And then he succeeded, and so they were like, all right, you know, you and your brother are kind of in charge of this, and he championed Zack Snyder, and then, you know, they all made Man of Steel together. That popped off, And then it was like, all right, Zach, you got the keys to the kingdom. Do whatever you want. And Zach has a very specific view of superheroes that he says time and time again is heavily influenced by Watchmen. And as much as I enjoy his Watchmen film, I think it kind of completely misses the point of Watchmen.
Right.
And I think he just doesn't get what Watchmen is trying to say about superheroes. And then he also has his own personal views, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And they're just, I think they're kind of conflicting with what DC is about, you know, for the most part. It's especially the Justice League.
What is DC about?
The Justice League especially are about these archetypical heroes who are larger than life, who are godlike, you know, heroes who represent the best of things. And like, I was tweeting about this the other day, and me and you always talk about this because I know you'll be like, Superman's just some Boy Scout. And I think that's kind of, it's like how I feel about people with Batman. I feel like that's kind of missing the point about him. And it's, or like saying that being a Boy Scout is bad. And someone else tweeted this the other day, and they said it so well, where they're like, people always want this fallen Superman, you know, the injustice version of Superman, because if someone like that falls, it makes it easier for you to be like, I ain't gotta be shit. Because if he ain't shit, then why would I be shit? And that's,
if the best of us ain't shit, then why do I gotta stand up to anything?
And see, that's the thing. To me, Superman isn't the best of us. And it's just like, it's the Jesus allegory. And that's the same thing. Like, my favorite version of Superman is probably the Grant Morrison All-Star Superman-ish. And one of my favorite pages of all of comic book time is when Superman hears this person on the phone talking to their therapist, and they're about to commit suicide. And Superman is battling some giant robot on the other side of Metropolis when he hears this. Going through all this, you know, he hears the conversation, and then he flies over there, lands around the person, puts his arms around them, and is like, you're stronger than this or something, you know. So,
I've seen that panel with like the goth kid, or the emo kid.
And it's like, you're stronger than this, you know. And sometimes I can't remember what the exact line is, and it's just one of the most beautiful things. But that's what Superman is, always the person who believes in us more than we believe in ourselves, and who thinks that because Superman is all powerful, but he sees us going through life every day and striving for better every day without being all powerful. So he sees us as the more powerful one.
Right. Well, once again, like similar to Batman, but now in a different way, like that idea has been subverted throughout the decades, because again, Superman started out as, and yes, a lot of people use the term Boy Scout. I just use that term because Lex Luthor says it. Yeah. To be very specific, not because I personally feel that way, but because that's what Lex says, and Lex is my dog. Yeah. But Superman, again, I wouldn't necessarily say goofy, but he was propaganda number one. He was used highly as a propaganda tool.
But then, also you gotta remember, like, that's the other thing. Like, at the very beginning of his shit, Superman was like an anti-union, fighting for the little man. Like, that's what his comics were about. Remember, his comics were created by two Jewish dudes. You know, like, that's the thing. Like, they were very anti-establishment.
That's fine. It's still propaganda. Like, depending on what side of the fence you're on. But
I mean, being anti-union and stuff like that and fighting for the little man is,
But nowadays we want union. So why would you want to be anti-union?
No, I mean anti, like, you know, he was not, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Like, he is for the unions and fighting for the little man.
Pro-union.
Yeah, pro-union, yeah.
Okay, because I was just like, I don't recall that. Okay.
Yeah, no, this is like very early Superman. Like, that's the thing. He was, you know, before it went super big, you know, he was definitely about, he was done by two Jewish dudes who were definitely about, you know, fuck the establishment and all that.
All right. Well, let me finish my point, which will incorporate what you're saying. Yep. So my point was, in the past, he's been used in different ways. One, as a propaganda tool, from the government standpoint, right? Yep. Also, from what you're saying, as a man of the people, and that's when we dive back into what you explained when it was like he believes in humanity and is for the little man and the minority, or whatever term you want to use. And in that way, those lofty thoughts and ways of moving in life are more colorful and more bright and airy. If you want to give it an adjective, like that's more light than what you're seeing now, which is the dark and brooding version of it. And again, this just could be well, and not even could. This is indicative of the age that we're living in, right? Where a lot of the stuff that in the past was deemed to be more positive and all that stuff is now given this air of being corny and being too righteous and, as you said, too Boy Scoutish. And because of that, people flipped it, or creators have flipped that on its head. And then, you see things like Injustice and all that, which I personally love. And we're talking about, I've always loved Injustice.
I know. I know.
But that idea of the darkness, pulling that robe of darkness over these characters that have, at least in the past, have traditionally been more light. And because, once again, you just had this point where people rejected the light and was like, I want the dark. And it worked, at least money-wise, right? At least revenue-wise, it's worked. And so what is the impetus that these studios and writers and everyone else has to go back?
Well, one, it hasn't worked nearly as well as Marvel. Like, if you stat the returns that Marvel has made versus the returns that DC has made, it ain't even close. And then when you look at a trilogy like the Captain America trilogy, which represents a Boy Scout type character, always good, always doing the right thing, it's one of Marvel's most successful and popular, critically acclaimed trilogies. So it's not like you can't do these type of films or these type of shows, whatever, with these characters. And that's something like, I get the appeal of Injustice, but to me it was always been like, oh, that's cute type-ish. And then, keep it moving, because
like it's an alternate multiverse version.
Yeah, and I need to see it once. I don't need to see it like continued over and over again, because that's not the core of what these characters are about, and it's really missing the chance to tell great stories like Batman, the Justice League cartoon, the Superman cartoon. All got these so right for years on end, and it just
those are the one, like,
yes.
To what Ben's saying, if you want to know what I guess the traditional core of these characters are, watch the Justice League animation.
Yes, it's one of my favorite things. Justice League Unlimited is one of my favorite things ever made of all time. It's just so good. But back to, we are getting off track a little bit of our main point. But one thing I did want to point out, because you were talking about how, it seems like dark is the way to go. And that's just a big problem I have right now, is that people just seem to, I feel it's the easy way out. It's always easy to be like,
yeah,
okay, well, what if Superman was evil? Because it's hard to write a very powerful, good person. But it's easier to write the evil version of that. That's simple to me. And so that's why I feel like people need to strive for better. But back to our main point that we were talking about, it also ties into that. It's like, that's why I don't really care. I mean, I'll go to see it. We'll talk about it on the show. But when I see the trailer for Batman and he's walking up on some thug or some person, I don't want to call him a thug, some person, and punching him in the face 9, 10, 12, 13 times, it does not really do much for me. Nah. It feels a little close to home.
Yeah. Even though, like, it sounds like everything we're talking about really is towards the question, the answer to the question of why do they keep making these films?
Yes, because they could do a lot of other characters.
These and again, right now we're kind of mainly harping on Batman and Superman, but like they, at the most basic common denominator, each of them represent very core values, right? Of an archetypal character, as you mentioned before. And those are just easy lanes to start in, because more creative minds would come up with, different ways to express this. But as far as why they are being expressed in the way that they're being expressed, it's because darkness has won, right? Darkness has ensued. And that's why we're still getting this over and over and over again. And that's, again, I'm just trying to understand, at what point do we not want the darkness anymore? Is it just because it's just reflective of the state we're in socially, or is it something else?
It's because but I feel like art creates life, et cetera. Art reflects life, etc. And I just wish people would strive for more, because there's just so much more to these characters, especially someone like Batman. Like recently, even in comics, like we don't even have to go back that far. Recently in the Grant Morrison run, Batman gets shot by Darkseid's Omega beams and sent back in time, where at one point he's a caveman who's also Batman. Like there's like so many weird stories you can do, and so much more than just Batman punches out some criminals again. It's so that part of it. And sadly, DC's like most profitable characters right now are Batman and the Joker. Like that's across all their mediums. Probably right behind them is Harley Quinn. With all of these characters, their biggest sellers are the ones with like mental,
reflective of what's going on in society. And I'm talking about Western society right now.
Yes. Or is it that that's what they promote so much, and thus people buy it? Like, I always go back to the analogy from the Spike Lee Malcolm X film, when not Farrakhan, when Elijah Muhammad is speaking to Malcolm, and he says the people will drink dirty water until you give them the clean one. Like if you keep giving them dirty water, that's all they know.
Ben, there's another part of this that your friendly neighborhood Chica, our social media manager, actually came up with this note, and she's dead ass correct. The reboots or the consistent reboots of these characters is also in many ways the reestablishment of like that white man savior trope for every new generation. And when she said that, I was just like, and different age brackets specifically were her words. But when she said that, I was like, God damn, she's right. Because my thing is, and I'm not saying, they have to be recast as other ethnicities, but I'm just saying this is the same type of white man with the same type of stories. And you mentioned that, just the fact that it seems to be like the same thing over and over again. We all see that it's kind of the same thing over and over again, and there's no true creative differences, maybe tonal differences in different ways, but it's the same approach, at least what we've seen in the last 15 plus years. So what is that about?
Oh, I fully agree with what Chica was saying. I think it's not exactly the white savior. The white savior, at least historically, is usually meant when, there's a bunch of black kids going to the school, and then the white person comes in and teaches them all how to Dougie, and they, save the world.
Not the Dougie.
Save the Last Dance, whatever. Anyway, what she really is right on point about is the fact that they are reestablishing the toxicness and the supremacy, and something that I like to call
supremacy.
Yeah, like what I like to call white boy fuel, right? And that was my big problem with Joker, and that's my big problem with Batman, right? You have people like Kyle Rittenhouse being vigilantes, and then you have films like Batman featuring vigilantes. And then you have films like Joker featuring people going out and just doing whatever, because the system's holding me down. Now I'm going to go out and shoot people.
It's the purge.
Yeah, now it's purge time because I couldn't get, a date with my psychiatrist. Like, no, it's fam, like we go through much worse every day, and don't go up and shooting up the dance. But that's my problem, because when you have media that encourages or reinforces the ideas of these behaviors, sometimes this is the result. And you might not see the results of a film like Joker, even though I think with like Kyle Rittenhouse, you've seen it already, but I think you might not see the results of this for 5-10 years until people who grew up on this type of media are of age where they can cause the type of incidents like, that ass jackass, monster did.
Damn. Yeah. And because we're wrapping up this particular discussion, I just want to talk to just everybody listening, whether you're a new listener, longtime listener, just be very, very understanding. The way Ben and I operate, we have these discussions to analyze and understand the entertainment we're consuming, and also to ask the questions that really need to be asked and understand what's going on in the world. This is not tearing apart your favorite character TM. Like, this is not what we're doing. This is not saying you know, and I don't know, Ben's making faces because he might
some of that.
He might feel sometimes he might feel differently sometimes.
Sometimes I'm doing that.
But I just want to make it clear, like, when people have debates or conversations, especially on this show, we're not saying, oh, you're terrible, and this on this, unless we say outright, you're terrible. I think we are very direct if we want to say somebody or something is trash, we're going to just say that. Otherwise, it is a creative debate, maybe an intellectual debate, maybe, you know, a topical debate. But like, the point is that we want to talk and understand what we're watching, what we're listening to, what we're consuming, what we are creating, because you want to know how that impacts society. You want to know how that impacts people's psyches and stuff like that. So that's why we're having these types of conversations, and why I actually really love this question when it came up.
Yeah, and definitely, because something I said earlier about how Superman was created to defend the little guy, at the same time, just like you said, Superman is a huge source of propaganda because he's this super uber white man, you know, and it's...
Yeah. That being said, I love Henry Cavill's Superman. I don't care what y'all say. I still like Man of Steel. I don't care what y'all say.
I do too, for the most part.
I've always and will forever fuck with Nolan's Batman. I don't care what y'all say. You know what I'm saying?
For the most part, I do too.
You know, but there's also going to just be stuff about all these characters that I'm going to question or I don't like or whatever. To answer that question I proposed to you about Battington, I don't really care. It's same old to me. Am I going to watch it? Yes, that's my job. Am I jumping, you know, chomping at the bit to go watch? Not really.
No, not at all. But we'll see and we'll check it out, you know, and we will have much more on this and many other subjects in the weeks to come, as always, on For All Nerds.